This story is about a girl named Lona. Despite a young age, the girl had to take care of herself on her own. The day was the first day of the new semester. However, Lona was no longer interested in going to school, or in other words, she hated school. The girl didn't even have a new school uniform as she had to wear her old one. For more than 5 months, Lona was used to doing everything on her own. Every day she woke up early in the morning to prepare breakfast for her and her dad. Lona's father was always drunk and didn't have a stable job. Her mom passed away a year ago due to a sickness, and a sudden death had caused Lona's father to be desperate and depressed. But Lona was a strong girl. Despite her still grieving over the death of her mother, she chose to stay optimistic and never stop trying. She believed that her mom in heaven would be very proud to see her growing up and acting maturely. For Lona, school was always a boring place, but she still went to school every day as she didn't want to upset her mom. At school, the mean kids always gossiped when they saw Lona, even pointed at her and called her names. She was called with nicknames like Pisspoor or Doggy. They disdained her for wearing old clothes and ripped back, and she was constantly bullied at school. Those were what Lona had to go through at school. Having to face it every day made her become a taciturn, reserved person. She tried to lead a happy life, but she wasn't allowed to do it. At times like that, Lona just ran to the river behind the school and cried. The girl had no friends to talk to, as they didn't want to get into any trouble being friends with her. Lona didn't want to talk about it to her father either, as she knew he wouldn't care anyway. Lona yearned for her mom to be here. She missed the days of her sitting in her mother's arm. If her mom was still there, she would never have to suffer from the hardships in her life. Tears rolling down her cheek as she felt pity for herself. It was at that moment her biggest wish was to see her mother again, or at least to hear her voice. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the ex-girl appeared and patted her head. The only thing left on her mind about the woman was a red X sign on her chest. The woman gave Lona a phone and said it was a present from Lona's mom. Then the woman turned around and walked away, but she didn't forget to remind her to keep the phone safe. It was a phone that could connect the other world, therefore she could talk to her mom using it. The woman disappeared. Lona took the phone and checked it. She noticed both front and the back of the phone had X signs printed on them. They looked similar to the one on the woman's chest. At first, Lona felt strange. She didn't believe there would be a phone with such magical uses, but she still wanted to give it a try. Despite finding it impossible to get to the other world, she still had hopes of getting the phone to work. Lona thought of her mom. The phone automatically made a phone call without having her to dial. Lona held her breath and waited. On the other end of the line, a voice was heard. Lona's heart skipped a beat. She was so amazed that she couldn't say anything. It took her a while to finally reply to the voice, as she was overjoyed. Indeed, the voice on the other line was of her mother. Tears kept rolling down her face as she heard her mom speaking to her after days of missing her mom terribly. She talked to her mom while tears was filling her eyes. She told her everything and how greatly she missed her. However, her mom didn't remember much about what had happened before, but it didn't upset her at all. To her, it was a sheer magic that she finally had a chance to talk to her mom again. Since that day, Lona was always seen having a bright smile on her face. She also kept the phone with her and called her mom every day. Lona felt like her mom was being by her side, and for that reason the girl no longer felt lonely. Lona became more optimistic since the day she could talk to her mom. She did better at school and the feeling of inferiority and self-pity had disappeared. Whether it was daylight or nighttime, Lona could always talk to her mom. It seemed like her soul had been healed thanks to the magical phone. Every night, Mom never forgot to tell her stories and lulled her to sleep. The memories once again evoked. She felt like her mom was there with her and held her in her arms. Lona slowly forgot the fact that her mom had passed away. She no longer bothered or got saddened by her drunken father. However, her father started paying more attention to her as he saw the bizarre behaviors of his daughter. He didn't understand why she always was alone in the room talking to someone, yet looked so happy. Then he accidentally found out his daughter was talking to his late wife, although she had passed away a year ago. The man was under his impression his daughter had mental disorders. That day, as usual, Lona walked to the river behind the school. She happily talked to her mom on the phone, not knowing there was someone watching her. It was Lona's father. He was angry as he thought Lona had stolen someone's phone, while partly thinking his daughter had yet to accept the death of his mother. So he rushed to his daughter and took the phone away. Lona turned around. She demanded him to give it back to her. But her dad refused to do it as he didn't want to see his daughter living in the past and went insane, so he insisted on not giving it back to her. Of course, the girl would never accept the fact that she wouldn't hear her mother's voice again. She bursted out crying and threatened to jump into the river if her dad didn't return the phone to her. Her actions made the dad furious. In a moment of anger, he slapped Lona in the face. But instead of crying, Lona was driven crazy. She rushed to her father, scratched him, trying to get the phone back. It was at this moment the dad realized how thoughtless he was to his daughter. He was angry by the way she reacted to him, yet didn't want to see her clinging to the hope that her mom would come back to her. So he threw the phone into the river to Lona's amazement. The phone quickly sank and was no longer to be seen. Lona screamed out loud as the phone was extremely valuable to her. Without it, she would never see her mom again. Thinking of the upcoming days without her mom being by her side, Lona couldn't stay calm. She jumped into the river. Her father tried to stop her, but it was too late. Lona had already been in the water searching for the phone that was slowly sinking to the bottom. At that moment, the image of her mom was the only thing coming to her mind. Her father was frightened. He fell on his knees, screaming her name, yet he didn't see her at all. The surface of the water became calm again, as if nothing happened. Meanwhile, Lona's father was in immense pain. He blamed himself for what he had just done. Lona had no strength left in her to swim ashore, yet she still tightly grabbed the phone in her hands. At the moment she faced her death, she was still not scared, as since the day her mom died, life had lost meaning to her. But luckily Lona was saved by a fisherman. As the man didn't know neither the girl nor their parents, he brought her home and temporarily let the girl take shelter in his house. After a long sleep, the girl finally awoke, just like a miracle. After 2 days of her being in a coma, the first person Lona saw was the old fisherman. As she was told what had happened to her, she thanked him for saving her life and asked to have his permission to go home, since she didn't want to bother him any longer. But the old man suddenly acted strangely. He insisted on not letting Lona go home and told her that she needed to rest longer. Since the moment Lona lost her consciousness to when she woke up, she always held the phone in her hands. Oddly, the phone didn't have any problem despite being in the water. Right when she noticed the strangeness of the old man, the phone vibrated. It was her mother on the other end of the line. She was overjoyed to know that the phone was still working, but quickly got frightened as her mom told her that the old fisherman was a bad person. He wanted to kidnap her and sell her for the human traffickers. The mom told Lona to remain calm and find a way to escape. For the past 2 days, Lona's dad had been searching for her and asked for her whereabouts. Coincidentally, he had encountered the house of the old man. But the cunning fisherman told him to go away, saying he hadn't seen any young girl near the place. The father had no idea that his daughter was in the house. He walked away with great sadness in his heart, but still had a ray of hope that he would find his daughter. Unfortunately, right when the old man got in the house, he accidentally saw the girl talking to someone on the phone. He didn't know the girl had a phone with her. If she escaped and his evil plan got exposed, he would definitely ended up being in jail. The old fisherman rushed to the little girl to take away her phone and control her. But the phone suddenly generated an electric wave, which caused the man to startle and fell onto the ground. The man tried to get the phone off him, but it clung to him tightly. Not just that, it constantly generated shockwaves that hurt him terribly. The man was scared, but he was angry too. The harder he tried to get the phone off him, the tighter it clung to his arm and the greater the shockwaves it generated. Feeling unbearable, he slammed the phone onto the ground in the hopes of getting it crushed. But the moment it got broken was also the moment he felt like something hit him hard in the head. It turned out that while he was struggling with the phone, Lona had found a paddle and used all her strength to hit him in his head. The old man fainted immediately. But instead of running away, Lona just cared about the broken phone laying on the ground. She approached it and picked it up. Her mother's voice was still being heard, but it didn't come out clearly. It looked like the phone was no longer available to be used. Before the voice on the other line died out permanently, Lona's mother told her that she couldn't be by her side anymore, and therefore the girl had to keep going on her own. She had to leave, and it was time for the little girl to accept the truth and move on. Tears ran down Lona's face as she listened to her mom. She found it hard to accept the fact that she would never hear her mom's voice again. But mom told her to keep on living. Her sentence gave the little girl a great source of strength to face the unexpected awaiting her. Leading an optimistic life, staying optimistic, studying hard and never stop being a good person. And she would be so proud of her little daughter to see her growing up every day without her being by her side. The past month had been a wonderful time to Lona. The girl would never forget the fairy tale she was told by her mom and the lullaby she sang to her on the phone every night. Lona didn't want her mom to leave, but she said a last goodbye to her mom with courage. Then she called the cops and quickly escaped before the old fisherman woke up. 15 minutes later, the police had arrived at the house and arrested the old man. Since the day Lona and her father reunited, the father was no longer an alcoholic. Instead, he spent more time on his work and his daughter. Life had become better for the two, and Lona had finally been to school every day without thinking too much. The little girl had become more cheerful, optimistic, and sociable. From afar, the ex-woman was delighted to complete her mission. The phone was a lovely present for the love of the girl and her mother. The woman made a phone call to her superiors saying the mission had been carried out successfully, as the phone could keep a human's memories as vivid as it could be. For Lona, she knew the gift from her mom was so magical. She hoped one day the ex-woman would appear to her again, so she could express her gratitude to her. This story is about Bly. Since she had experienced a lot of stress from her daily life in the city, she decided to treat herself to a trip back to her hometown. This old apartment building was in her family's possession. Her parents had passed away when she was at a young age. This time, getting back to the property, she felt a gloomy, scary atmosphere taking over the place. Bly slowly walked by the apartments. Most of them were not occupied. It took her a while to bring her luggage to the story where she lived. Strangely, even though she had spent most of her time growing up here, this time on her return she felt a little bit scared. As Bly was heading to her room number 206, the door suddenly opened, which gave her a fright. Standing behind the door was a woman with a skinny, pale face. She was holding a doll in her hands, and it looked scary too. Bly was scared to death to see the scene before her eyes. As she couldn't hold in her emotions, she screamed in panic and looked so terrified as if she had seen a ghost. As Bly didn't know what to do, suddenly a woman at the end of the corridor approached her. It was her aunt. She reassured Bly and said that it was just a mad woman. Since the day she lost her daughter, she always kept the doll with her as she assumed it was a beloved child. Not just that, the aunt also told Bly not to communicate with her. Bly was curious about it, but she just put on a smile as she didn't want to bother her asking too much about the old woman. But that night, a terrifying incident had happened to her. As Bly was in her peaceful sleep, when it came to midnight, she suddenly awoke up. Her face changed color as if she had just had a nightmare. She indeed had a nightmare, a really scary one, and it was related to something she saw in the afternoon. In her nightmare, Bly was attacked by something. She was pressed to a corner. Her whole body was trembling while sweat was dripping on her forehead. Appearing in front of Bly now was a child with plump, rosy hands. He approached her and constantly roared like a wild animal. He crawled faster towards Bly and opened his mouth with sharp teeth, intending to attack her. Right that moment, Bly woke up and realized that it was just a dream, but it felt so real to her, as the horror and panic was still vivid on her face. Bly decided to take a shower to remove all the stress she was having. Perhaps it was because of the negative emotions she experienced after having an abortion back in the city, and the creepy doll she encountered with at the apartment made her feel uncomfortable. Bly went outside to free herself from all the pressure, hoping that she would become more cheerful as she returned home. Bly twisted the doorknob, trying not to make any sound as she didn't want to disturb other people. It was quiet and deserted outside. As Bly was heading to the stairs, the old woman at the apartment number 206 opened the door and walked out, as if she had been waiting to see Bly. She was still holding the doll. The woman didn't wait for Bly to say anything. She talked to her. It was unknown how the woman could find out about Bly having a nightmare the night before. The woman looked in Bly's eyes and said that she was not a psycho. She knew it was a doll she held in her arms. But since it was a memento of her child, she cherished it a lot and always kept it with her. Then the woman offered to help Bly. She wanted to lend the doll to Bly and told her to place it under her bed as it would prevent her from having nightmares. This was also the main reason why she always had the doll beside her. Bly was amazed. She couldn't understand how this woman could find out about her situation. At first, Bly was in two minds about the woman's offer, but she accepted it anyway. Something magical happened to Bly. Since the day the doll was placed under her bed, she no longer had nightmares in her sleep. She didn't expect what the old woman said had turned out to be true. Even though she felt strangely about it, she still decided to keep the doll under her bed. The last 2 nights had been great to her as she didn't suffer from any nightmare, and as a result, her health both mentally and physically had improved a lot. It was the doll that haunted her in her dreams who helped her escape from these terrible nightmares. Bly came to thank the old woman. The woman told Bly that she could keep the doll with her and returned it when she left. Bly thanked the woman, saying that she would go back to the city at the end of the week and would return the doll to her by the time she left. At this moment, from the opposite room, Bly's aunt was secretly watching the two. Seeing Bly having a conversation with the woman, the aunt had a worried expression on her face, as if she knew something about that apartment 206. She didn't want to interrupt the two as she just sighed deeply. Bly, after talking to the old woman, suddenly felt weary. As she laid on the couch, her eyes hardly opened because of tiredness. Bly looked at the ceiling. She constantly changed her position to stretch her tendons. The atmosphere started getting cold. Bly had a feeling of something approaching her. She felt like her hands were being touched by something. The sudden touch startled her. What even more terrifying was the moment she opened her eyes. She saw no one there. There was only Bly in the house. So who had walked past her and even touched her hands? Being pensive for a while after regaining her composure, Bly thought the doll that she had borrowed from the woman 2 days before. Bly plucked up her courage and entered the room. In order to find out whether the doll was still under the bed or not, the freaky doll was still there, but its posture freaked Bly out. She was certain that she had placed the doll lying on the ground 2 days before, but now it was in a sitting position, like a child. Suddenly there were strange noises coming out of the doll. Bly stared at it in amazement. She held her breath. The doll turned around in a spooky manner as it rotated by 180 degrees. The head was bent backwards, while the face looked lifeless. The doll then let out a creepy evil smile. It showed the sharp teeth looking exactly like what had happened in Bly's nightmares. Bly screamed out loud, then tried to run out of the room as fast as she could. The only person she could think of now was the doll owner. As Bly got out of her apartment, she quickly ran to the room 206, slamming the door in panic. As she slammed the door, she tilted her head to see her apartment, checking if the doll was chasing after her. Not keeping Bly waiting any longer, the woman immediately opened the door as soon as she heard her scream. Bly wasn't in the mood to greet her. She got straight to the point. She told the woman that she wanted to return the doll. The woman remained calm to Bly's fear. She gazed at her steadily and calmly replied that it was just a doll. There was no point in getting scared over it. Bly's face became darkened as she listened to what the woman said. It seemed to her that this woman was indeed a psycho. The woman told Bly not to be worried too much about the doll, as it was just an inanimate object. Right that moment, Bly was startled to see something. She quickly got horrified. That was the hand of the doll sticking out from the door. How could it be like that? The woman said perhaps Bly was actually the psycho, not her, and told Bly to return to their apartment. Then she slammed the door. As Bly was yet to compose herself, she felt something clinging onto her and climbed all the way up. It was the freaky doll. It rested its head on her back and let out a creepy smile. Not just that. The haunted doll pulled out its tongue and licked all over Bly's face. The tongue had a length that was 3 times longer than that of a human, making it look like it belonged to a monster. The mouth got wide into the ears. Inside it was filled with sharp teeth and a very long tongue. Horrified, Bly let out a fierce scream. She closed her eyes tightly and started waving in panic. As Bly finally opened her eyes, she found herself laying on the ground. Was everything just a nightmare of hers? Bly was in a state of bewilderment. It took her a while to fully awake. She sat up only to realize that she had a sore throat and weary limbs while her head was aching badly. Bly came to the realization that it was not simply a nightmare, and there must be a hidden secret about the doll. Bly plucked up her courage and went to see the woman again. What amazed her this time was the woman once again appeared with the doll in her hands. Bly confusedly asked why the doll was being with her. But the woman showed no worries. She told Bly that the doll had been given back to her last night. How could Bly forget about it so quickly? The woman told Bly to come into her house as she wanted to tell her a story about a child. The child had mysteriously died when he was nearly 1 year old, and this doll was there with him since the day he was born until he left this world. The woman showed a picture of her child to Bly. According to the woman, the doll was given to her by a mysterious man who had an X logo printed on his shirt when she was pregnant. Bly quickly noticed something strange with the picture, as the boy didn't look happy with his only toy, as Bly assumed that the infant was scared of the doll. The woman immediately became angry. She took back the picture from Bly and held that the doll was his son's favorite toy. He had always been happy and cheerful playing with it. But Bly didn't give in. She asked the woman to act reasonably, as the doll was definitely not a normal one to her. The woman reacted even more aggressively towards Bly. She bursted out crying and spoke as if she was being hypnotized. She said that the doll was like her son, and she had to take care of it with great love, as it would make up for tragic death of a child. The doll in her hands unexpectedly acted in such a calm and gentle manner. Seeing the woman like this, Bly was no longer scared of her. Instead, she felt pitifully for her. But the more pitiful she felt towards the woman, the more she wanted to free her from the little monster. She quietly reached to a scissor on a table nearby, and slowly walked to the woman without making any audible sound. The woman was still carrying the doll in her arms. gently hugging it. As the woman was off guard, Bly raised the scissor in her hand and stabbed it to the head of the doll. After the doll was stabbed, from the wound oozed out a black liquid. The woman screamed out in pain. She collapsed on the floor. Right after that, the woman saw something truly terrifying. Bly was also scared to see the scene before her eyes. The doll that was thought to be inanimate now started moving and slowly transforming. The wound on its head was torn apart by a mysterious creature that slowly came out of it. The giant monster with many creepy-looking eyes on its body, a mouth filled with sharp teeth and an extra long tongue. Down the apartment building, Bly's aunt was sweeping the floor, trying to ignore the screams coming up outstairs. She sighed deeply, wondering why Bly didn't listen to her in the first place. On the first days of the new year, the weather was cold and the streets were crowded with people. Looking at the couples passing by hand in hand together, Coleman didn't feel comfortable at all. Coleman was a jobless guy and he wasn't good looking either. Every time Coleman encountered a couple that gave intimate gestures to each other on the streets, he couldn't hide the jealousy in his eyes. He wondered how it would feel like to hold hands of a person of the opposite sex. He wished that one day he could find himself a girlfriend. Occasionally Coleman was dealing with his chronic loneliness, sneakily looked at women's breasts. As he saw a girl wearing a couple shirt with a boyfriend, Coleman couldn't take his eyes off her chest. The perverted Coleman also imagined himself as a guy so he could touch the body of the beautiful woman. But a few seconds later, he had to go back to reality with the sadness on him. Coleman clearly knew that with a face like his, he would never get a girl's attention, let alone having a girlfriend. Back when he was in school, he was constantly bullied because of his ugly look. As Coleman was having thoughts on his mind, he accidentally bumped into two girls who was walking in the opposite direction. The two were extremely annoyed to see him, as if he was a misfortune that happened to them. The people around them, despite not knowing what was going on, stopped for a while murmuring, telling Coleman was molesting the two girls, while others said he bumped into the girls yet didn't apologize. The girl furiously yelled at him, asking if he was blind, then scolded him for his neglect and also his ugly look. Being insulted by the two girls and the bystanders, Coleman stood there like a stone. His face became darkened and he was unable to utter any single word. A while later, the two girls finally decided to leave, and Coleman at that moment was still bowing down, saying sorry to them. However, the two young women were still boiling with anger as they walked away yet continued to curse him and insulted him. Those harsh words were unconsciously heard by Coleman. Even though it wasn't the first time he was insulted for his look, those words still cut deep in his heart, causing him great pain. The proverb that says, "A bad penny always turns up," turns out to be true to Coleman, as he once again saw the two rude girls who had just insulted him. Seeing them this time made him so scared that his face quickly turned pale, but it looked like the two didn't see him. The young girl saw a cute giant stuffed rabbit that immediately took out their phones and took some pictures with it, while posing for the pics to look perfectly. At times like this, Coleman was jealous of the person that wore the bunny costume, as they could be able to get close to the girls without being called a pervert. Suddenly, Coleman came up with an idea. The moody look on his face quickly disappeared and replaced by excitement. It turned out that Coleman wanted to get himself a teddy bear costume and work as a balloon seller. Only that way could help him hide his ugly face yet give him chance to get close to the beautiful woman. So Coleman went to a thrift store in order to get him a teddy bear costume. Luckily, he was given the costume for free by a man named X, who was also the owner of the store. The next day, Coleman began to carry out his plan. He confidently put on the costume, and then, with the balloons in his hand, he approached the spots that were most crowded. Carmen's plan had definitely worked, as many young girls rushed to him for a picture as soon as they saw him in the adorable teddy bear costume. It was indeed the first time that Carmen had received that much attention to him. It was also his first time to be that close to women. At first, Carmen was acting politely to them. He stood still and put his hands on their shoulders, posing for pictures. However, as the girls were excited and didn't pay much attention to his actions, the man started to act inappropriately. At first, he was staring at the girls' private parts and then intentionally touched them. If it wasn't for the cute, lovely face of the teddy bear costume, he would have been exposed immediately. Fortunately, the girls didn't know anything about his perverted behavior, as they were happy and even waved goodbye to Carmen. Carmen also politely waved goodbye to them, pretending to be an innocent bunny bear. But in reality, he was actually a perverted man with a sick mind. He couldn't hide the satisfaction on his face after successfully carrying out his plan. And just like that, Carmen had easily achieved his purpose by putting on the stuffed costume. Carmen came back home with a positive mood. He went inside the bathroom, singing, looking so passionate about life. However, it was easy for him to put on the costume at first, yet so difficult to take it off. Carmen struggled to pull down the zipper on his back. Somehow it became so stiff, and the man found it difficult to unzip it. Carmen started sweating. However, he was simply thinking that perhaps the zipper was broken since the costume had already been oiled, and that was why he had difficulties unzipping it. Then Carmen tried to pull down the zipper again, eventually unzipped it a little bit. Having no choices left, Carmen had to curl up and crawl out of the costume through the small hole. It took him a while to completely take it off. Then Carmen went to the bathroom and relaxed after a tiring day. While he was taking a shower, he couldn't stop thinking about the girls that he had met that morning. Little did he know that on his back had an unexpectedly grow a spot of hair which had the same color as that of the teddy bear costume. It seemed like the costume wasn't a normal one. What secret was hiding from? It looked so spooky. The next morning, Carmen excitedly bought another bunch of balloons, put on his costume, and then started doing his perverted actions. The man could easily approach girls with the adorable look of his costume. However, something strange had happened. As Carmen was giving a balloon to a girl, he had accidentally touched her in the hand. Normally, he wouldn't have much sensation through the thick layer of the costume, but somehow this time he felt the touch was so real. While Carmen was still thinking about it in bewilderment, from afar a couple was approaching him. Seeing the lovely bear, the girl quickly rushed to it. She handed her ice cream to the boyfriend and ran to Carmen. The young man was confusedly not knowing what was happening, and the young girl ran to the teddy bear, beamed with delight, and then hugged it. The girl couldn't hide the excitement on her face. She hugged Carmen tightly. Of course, Carmen wouldn't let the chance slip by. He quickly hugged the girl back. As the two touched each other, the sensation became even more real, as if Carmen wasn't having the costume on him. As he started with his perverted actions, the man smirked and let out an evil smile. Carmen started acting more inappropriately. He touched her hips and slowly reached down his hands to her bottom. Maybe Carmen could do it without being noticed by the girl, but her boyfriend immediately noticed his actions. Seeing the weird gestures of Carmen, the muscular man quickly saw through his evil intention. He furiously shouted, "Hey, you with that teddy bear costume! How dare you touch my girlfriend? Do you want to die?" Seeing the tall muscular figure of the man, together with a furious look on his face, Carmen couldn't stop trembling. In just a few seconds, the man rushed to Carmen and grabbed him. Immediately, the man hit Carmen in the face with the ice cream in his hand. Then he rolled up his sleeves, intended to beat up Carmen. He demanded Carmen to take off the costume and get in a fight with him, as he wouldn't let Carmen get away with his perverted gestures toward his girlfriend. Then, Carmen also stood up. The man was thought to accept the challenge and fight back. Turned out that he was just a coward. As the big man was off guard for a moment, Carmen pushed the girl to his side and quickly ran away. Seeing Carmen escape, the man became even more furious. He gritted his teeth and shouted at Carmen. At that moment, Carmen was running for his life. He knew for sure that if he was caught by that big man, he would get beaten badly, so he fearfully made his way to an alley. Carmen quickly found a spot in the alley to hide, as he gasped for breath while looking behind him. But he neither saw anyone nor heard the footsteps of that big man. As soon as he let out a sigh of relief, he suddenly heard a strange noise from the end of the street. Now Carmen was extremely scared as the sweat was pouring all over his body. Feeling a sense that the alley was no longer being safe, Carmen quickly ran away, looking for another place to hide. But no matter which place he went to, he could still hear the sound. Carmen was so scared that his whole body couldn't stop trembling. At that moment, he couldn't stay calm anymore. As he was running in fear, he accidentally stumbled on an empty bottle. Losing his balance, the man fell into the ground. However, despite wearing a stuffed costume with a thick layer of cotton protecting him, the fall still ached him badly. As Carmen was still unable to get up and keep running again, he saw a shadow appearing on the ground. It was the shadow, the big tall man that had been chasing Carmen, in order to knock the daylight out of him as he dared to molest his girlfriend. The muscular man grabbed the head of the bear costume, but somehow Carmen felt like someone was pulling his hair. Without hesitation, the man gave Carmen a punch. Seeing how far the distance Carmen was thrown away by the punch, it was safe to say that the punch was not a light one, as his mouth was bleeding. The tall guy also felt strangely, despite landing his punch on the head of the bear costume. It felt as if he had actually thrown his punch on human flesh. Not giving Carmen a chance to escape, the tall man went in front of the trembling Carmen, ready to land more punches on him. Carmen was extremely frightened. The feeling of extreme fear was spreading throughout his body. This time the man wanted to take the costume off Carmen to see who was inside. But no matter how hard he tried, the man couldn't remove the costume, which made him furious. Therefore, he put all of his anger on Carmen by kicking him constantly. Despite Carmen begging him to stop, the man still kept hitting him. Not only that, the man let out an evil smile and said that he would stop hitting him as long as the costume was completely torn and revealed the one inside it. The man was under the impression that his thick costume would ease the force of his punches, so kept hitting Carmen more intensely. Little did he know that Carmen was breathing shallowly inside. Oddly, from the corner of the bear's eyes, tears were rolling down. Realizing it, also no longer hearing the screams of Carmen, the man suddenly stopped in fear. What was even more terrifying, inside the costume was not a person, yet only a thick layer of cotton. Seeing the scene in front of him, the man's face became darkened. He was extremely bewildered. What in the world happened? Carmen had eventually turned into a stuffed teddy bear, as inside the costume was cotton being pulled out on the ground. Unbelievable.